Hi, welcome to the Courage to Rise show. I am Katie Cianci, your host, and we're so excited and honored actually to have our guest here, who is Professor Edwin Monaghan. And he's been involved in health and fitness and martial arts field for over 30 years. He's the owner of ECADA, and he's also a professor at UCLA in the television, theater, film area, where he teaches undergraduate courses on movement, exercise science, Eastern philosophy, and combat for stage and film. He's also from Mind Body Faculty Committee. He's on the Mind Body Faculty Committee and is certified mindfulness facilitator for UCLA's Mindful Awareness Research Center. I also know Ed as my son has been in his program and since he was 5, and I'm just so grateful because he's learned so many skills in life skills, and he's struggled with behaviors of ADHD, and so his program is really focused on helping many different people, like adults with PTSD, does research on how movement can help with that, and also helping with learning for children with ADHD and autism, so many things. And you also help people with addictive behaviors and managing that through mindfulness and movement. And you're also America's top 100 trainers. Mm. I mean, there's just so many things. We could go on and on. But one I didn't know about you, which was Martial Arts Leader of the Year. Mm. You were in 2010, you were named that. So remarkable. And I just
feel it's the USA.
Yes. Yeah. So I'm so excited. The reason I asked you here was because, I've known you for several years, and I've seen the remarkable shift that happened from when I first brought my son to your center and to where he is now. And I learn from him all the time. I learn from you. And I know there's so many people out there, whether it be working parents or just people that are in high performing positions, and they're just going about life and they're stressed all the time and are really struggling with finding balance. And you just do it. So you do a really good job of teaching people how to do that. And you have a lot of tools that you teach. And I just thought it would be really helpful. So I'm grateful that you're here.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm happy to do so.
So do you mind sharing a little bit about yourself, just a little bit about like how you got to find mindfulness and martial arts?
Oh yeah, sure. I'd be happy to. I was not your typical seeker who was looking for Mr. Miyagi. I was a real punk when I was a kid, and there was no real good reason for that because I grew up in lower middle class neighborhood upbringing in Kentucky, and my parents loved me and were nice folks. I was never abused or anything like that. But from the very earliest age, kindergarten, I was just full of rage. And so I would just get into fights. And the teachers would say, I don't know why he does that. He just balls his little fists up and his face gets red and he just gets so angry. Mm-hmm. And that characterized my life experience for the full first half of my life, really. Mm-hmm. And then that led to a great deal of discontentment and feeling ill at ease. And from a very early age, I kind of began this process of moving into addictive behaviors with drugs and alcohol, mm-hmm. and was a full-blown addict and alcoholic by the time I was probably 14, mm-hmm. and just almost completely destroyed myself multiple times. Mm-hmm. And it was a number of factors that enabled me to pull free of that. And some of the tools that I utilized to be able to achieve that is what I've worked for many years on in order to improve myself and to be more present, conscious, aware, empathetic, and to release that rage that characterized the first part of my existence. And, I literally was the guy who would get pissed off in traffic and slam on the brakes and go drag somebody out of their car and start slamming their head against the hood. Mm-hmm. And I haven't had to experience that type of pain and that anger for a long time. Mm-hmm. So I did all this stuff for me to start out with, and then began to evolve and develop the programs for others, because that's ultimately what I felt my purpose and calling was going to be, in order to enable other people to kind of find a path to abate these negative tendencies.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you for sharing that. Yeah, I mean, so you've really overcome a lot of adversity in your life, and you've now teaching others how there's another way. You don't have to go down that, there's anger that boils up, with, situations, circumstances, people that you're hanging around with. But then there's also another way and how you can redirect that energy.
Absolutely. So one of the ways that helped me was the expression of physicality. Mm-hmm. So from an early age, martial arts was a big part of what I did. And I played other sports, football, basketball, things like that. But this really captured me. And the thing that captured me about it was the mystique. It was the sense that there was something more to it than just the physical. And so I originally started doing it because I just wanted to beat people up. I mean, that was really, there was no noble intent behind it. I was hanging out with a bunch of drug dealers, and I wanted to make sure that I could womp on them before they did something to me. Yeah. But then as it evolved, it opened the gate to studying Eastern philosophy. And that's what I ultimately really moved forward with. And I began to look at and study different traditions and philosophies. And when I was in school, that's what I really explored, was this path of comparative religions and philosophies, and looking at the Western face and the Western philosophies and how they juxtapose against the Eastern belief systems, and how there are parallels that run through them. And one of the things I mentioned to you previously was that when you look at ancient societies that were known for their ability to flourish and nourish the populace, where everyone was a contributing factor to the whole, that were successful. If you look at the ancient Greek society, the Renaissance, the Ming Dynasty in China, the characteristics are all very similar in that they highly valued a multiplicity of skill sets, of being able to be well-rounded. The Renaissance man, and that's what that alludes to, is being able to be an artist, be a scientist, be an athlete, to have a well-rounded and a connection spiritually in life. And it's not restricted to any one specific path, but you do see this commonality with all of them. So I've structured our programs to reflect that, so that they can be pluralistic and open up. One of the things at MARC, the Mindful Awareness Research Center, that we talk about, and that Diana Winston's the head of the mindfulness education at that center, she wants radical accessibility, meaning that anybody should be able to access this, regardless of belief system, lack thereof, whatever your persuasion is, you should still be able to participate in all of this and find the path that resonates with you as an individual. So that's what I always liked about it. It wasn't restrictive, and that you weren't stuck with looking at anything in one particular way. And so the martial art that we teach, Jeet Kune Do, Bruce Lee's martial art, that's what that is all about. That's what he was all about, is being open and really understanding and the search for the truth. And what is that? And that's might be different from person to person, but being open and receptive so that you can view things from multiple perspectives and capture the broad view rather than being so narrowly focused.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And one of the quotes that I remember with Bruce Lee is, I'm really saying the very small part, but be like water. Mm-hmm. He talks about be like water. And from your perspective, what did he mean by that?
Like, well, this is very old and well-known Taoist analogy that is drawn where we look at elements of nature, and that's the overarching theme behind the Taoist practice, is aligning oneself with nature, recognizing the natural patterns that occur, and then aligning ourselves with those patterns so that we can live a more harmonious life. If you look at the nature of water, it's highly adaptable. One of the other principles that's brought to bear through the Tao Te Ching, which is kind of the root core text in Taoist practice from Lao Tzu, is that water seeks the lowest level and it nourishes all equally. So the principle is that with water, it's an amazing element in that it can fit to and adapt to any shape, that it has immense power. You can, as Sijou Lee said, you can flow with water, it can crash, it can overwhelm and destroy, but it can be soft and fluid and move with things. So what it refers to is being adaptable, allowing ourselves to really open and then find that spirit that enables us to be able to move with our circumstances as they arise without conflict, but in harmony. And then at times it's appropriate when we're met with adversity and we have a roadblock to use the energy to crash through that. So it's not always about being the reed in the wind, but it's also about sometimes just accumulating the force necessary to be able to blast through our individual blocks that may inhibit our growth.
Yeah, I mean, we can have resistance to something, but sometimes that's when we have resistance, sometimes it's because we're trying something new and it's uncomfortable and we don't want to do it. Sometimes we're resisting something, and oftentimes we're resisting something that's actually good for us, but we're just like, no, I'm not going to do it. It's uncomfortable. I just noticed that when I was in one of your classes doing some of the calisthenics that you had us do, the exercises, I'm like, okay, I'm going to do it, pushing through, because that's life, right? Like things come up and challenges that we have. And sometimes we want to just kind of, sometimes you are a victim of what happens, but then how can you shift from that into a place of feeling powerful rather than powerless? And you teach that in your classes, even in a way of like, how can you, at least from a woman's perspective, I felt very much more, I felt powerful in your classes.
Absolutely. It brings the fundamental principle of yin and yang. And then we look at the 5 elements. So if you look at water, fire, there's time for fire. We talk to the kids about that. There's a time to allow the fire to rise, that fire energy. And there's a time that it does come up. And that's where, one of the things that's important to recognize, and you as a therapist certainly are astute in this arena, is that you have you have to recognize that your feelings are very natural and they arise. And it's not about not feeling. It's about being able to manage the feelings as they arise and then channel them in a healthy way. So that's one of the things with anyone who's experiencing that class. I mean, sometimes people don't want to allow that energy to come up. And it's necessary to be able to blow through whatever those obstacles might be. So you kind of have to push through sometimes. We encounter adversity, and at times it's necessary for us to test our mettle. And that's something that we've begun to allow to diminish in our current society, which is, nobody should ever feel any pain. Nobody should ever feel any adversity. It's just not reality. And so, when you look at young people, a lot of their benchmarks of success, these trials by fire, these barriers to entry into a new phase of life, are meant to be difficult. You have to push through them. You have a trial that you have to move through, and that's literally what, if you look at belt tests, if you look at getting a black belt, that's a rite of passage.
Mm-hmm.
You move through something. It's like in the Native American cultures, your vision quest. You would have to face the adversity of managing this vast wilderness by yourself, and being assigned a very difficult task where you can risk your life.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, we're not asking people to risk their life, but it's sticking your neck out, and there's a lot to be said for that.
Well, it can feel like that for some people. I mean, putting their neck out, meaning doing something that they, taking a risk, doing something that is challenging, or that they could fail. And I've noticed that with parents, and you may or may not have experienced this, but I've noticed that with parents, oftentimes, we don't want our children to fail. We don't want our children to go through what we went through, and they're going to have their own path and their own journey. But there's also a risk of trying to be so overprotective that we don't allow them to fail. We don't allow them to take risks and face that and say, you know what, if I do fail, I'm going to be okay, because that builds resilience. It builds character. It builds like, okay, if I fail, I'm okay. And I see a lot of pressure on these kids, like at a young age, that they have to be perfect and be in all of these activities. And while it's great, I mean, it can also be not really beneficial in the long run.
Well, I think we have to look at what makes a complete human being.
Mm-hmm.
And part of what we forget in our quest to aid our kids in being as successful as possible is that part of success is just simply the enjoyment of life.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't have that, then what really is success? If you question anyone who, and there have been multiple books written about this with very successful people on their deathbed, what do you remember?
Mm-hmm.
They remember relationships. That's what's relevant, what's important. It's not that you did $1 billion worth of business and whatever, but how did you connect? The quality of your life and the experiences of life. So are we allowing our kids the opportunity to have time just to be, just to play?
Mm-hmm.
And then the question goes back to us, to we as adults. Do we give ourselves time to play? I mean, we all get super busy because we've got stuff. We have to make a living. We have to be with our families. We have to take care of our families, all those things. But along the way, that's one of the reasons we advocate art, is because that's part of playing as a human. You have to give yourself the freedom to just have the time to experience life. and to pick up a guitar and play it, or to hit the drums, or to whatever it is that you like to do. It doesn't make any difference if it's paint, if it's dancing, but that joy of just being in creation. With our kids, we rob them of that because you must have everything scheduled exactly. You got to do your piano lesson. You got to do your martial arts. You've got to do your soccer. You've got to do your horseback riding. We get them scheduled, to every moment of every day. And I think with the greatest of intent, try to help our kids, but we're increasing their stress loads to the degree that they can't even exist. And you see this, the kids that have these huge stress loads, you can see it in the research about how, when we looked at kids that are in elementary schools are experiencing now teenage and adult levels of stress loads because they're picking it up from us, and the pressure is being thrust upon them by who? Well, us. So we have to look at that and kind of take a step back and begin to create space, I think.
Well, it comes like it's such a different, we're in such a different place now in modern times than we were back then. And we don't have the same technology. Our lifestyle is so different. We're not as mobile as we used to be. And
Absolutely.
So how can people, it used to be that and back before that it was balance was part of, that was just an everyday thing, or what was?
Well, I think if you look at agrarian cultures, what do you do on a daily basis? You will, that's my wife.
Hi.
So what do you do? You get up in the morning, you go out in the fields, you're in nature all day. You eat. Your clock is set by the sun. You have your family with, so you kind of harken back to olden times, right? What did families do? They would gather around the piano and they would sing together. They would have activities and games where they would play together. They would be physical because they were having to work the land. Now, I'm not saying that we have to go back to that. You want to come in?
Do you want to say hi?
But I think if we touch on that, if we have some balance to where is this sun too much?
Oh yeah, I think.
Yeah.
I just thought it was, spirit coming in.
Yeah, that's right. No, that's on.
Saying yes, I'm glad you're talking about this.
So but I do think we have to have some part of that in our life. So time in nature, that's one of the things we talked about. Sleep, being able to have physical activity in your life, being able to have some form of creativity in your life, being able to have a connection with something beyond this thing. So, it comes back to being a human and being in the world. And these are wonderful technological tools. This thing that we're doing right now is a great opportunity to be able to share with people. But it comes down to being in the world and being in life and being present with
that. When you say, people talk about oneness, and would you mind sharing what ekata means?
So it's a Sanskrit term that means literally oneness. And it goes back to what we were talking about previously, where what are the commonalities? What is the unity? How is this a shared experience with all of humanity and with all of nature? That was really the essence of it. So it wasn't to be geared toward one specific approach, but really an all-inclusive approach. So that's why we chose the name for the facility to be that, is that, and probably to our detriment, because nobody knows what it means.
Well, it's a nice name though.
Well, we think so. We think so. But that's that's that overarching theme of our facility is what our belief system really is.
Yeah, oneness, because that's kind of really what it's all about, is being one, that we all come from one source and we're all connected. And that's, and with, like you say, with nature, with each other as other human beings, with animals. I mean, we're all connected.
Yeah, and there's a beautiful, we have a picture from Taiwan that's the dome of a temple that actually, this is the symbol. Kind of see it a little bit there.
Oh, yeah.
And the center of the symbol is a yin yang, but it's split with two dots. And that symbol, Lao Mu, is a reference to oneness. It's the personification of that oneness in a division of Taoist philosophy. And from that oneness, from that unity, and the dome of the temple is constructed this way so that you'll see Lao Mu at the center, and it emanates outward into the yin yang, the principle of duality, of what we experience as relative reality. And then it emanates outward in these beautiful colors, but then depicted on all sides of the temple are murals from the faiths of the world, showing that these are all beautiful emanations of that same central source. And that's what's always resonated with me about Taoist practice, is that these are all manifestations of that same God, or the same Tao, or same Brahman, whatever you choose to say, or whatever label you choose to put on it. The essence is ultimately the same.
Yeah, it's true. And what would you say would be something that you like, advice that you would, because you're a parent and you also have, your children are grown now. Yeah. Pretty grown.
Yeah, they're very grown. Yeah, I've got a almost 30-year-old son and a 24-year-old son.
Yeah. So they're grown. So what advice would you give? Would you give yourself as a parent, or other parents who are raising, children? What advice would you have for them?
Beat them regularly. Oh gosh, that's such a loaded question. Because it's a number of factors. I think the biggest of all is recognizing our own unconscious behaviors and how they contribute and impact negatively upon the kids. So we have to look after ourselves and recognize that our afflictions immediately transfer into our kids. So we have to manage our stuff first, and then we have a chance at being able to help them to avoid those afflictions and passing that down generationally. So I think that's probably the biggest suggestion. And then the mindfulness practice is so relevant because it builds awareness and it builds compassionate, empathetic behavior. Beginning a practice like that can be the starting point of, and the ignition of that awareness that can lead to conscious choices and conscious behaviors that can move you toward therapeutic interventions or other possible steps that might help to create greater regulation across the board for both kids and the parents, and contribute to harmonizing the relational qualities between parents and kids.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's also with like really any relationship. If some people don't have children, I mean, with your partner, with your family, with anyone that you surround yourself, your ways of being affects your interactions with everyone. I mean, our energy, our ways of being. So the mindfulness practice shifts that. We are able to be aware of, oh, I'm out of sync, or, oh, I'm being reactive to this situation. And let me take a moment to reflect and get myself more centered so I can respond rather than react.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
that's powerful. So yes, mindfulness, so important. So would you say if someone wanted to contact you, I know that you're offering, do you want to share like the gift that you're offering? Anyone who's
So what we're doing,
local?
anybody who wants to come in and participate with us, who is within our area, can come in and mention that they've seen this interview, and we'll be happy to give them a month of free training.
Oh, that's good.
And uh, uh, and the biggest thing is just to participate in your own way, in some way that resonates with you. Anybody who wants to know about mindfulness practice, they can contact me at my email, sifued@gmail. It's spelled SIFUED. And I'm happy to correspond with them. You can go to our website at UCLA, marc.ucla.edu. There's tons of resources on there, free meditations, courses that you can take. The main thing is just to begin a practice. And the mere fact that anybody would even be watching this immediately, I think, clearly their interest is in some sort of evolution for themselves. Otherwise, there's no reason they would be watching this.
That's true. That's true. Yeah. Well, thank you very much. I mean, other thing I want to just quickly mention is that you've helped be a consultant to many schools. I mean, that's
Yes.
really powerful in teaching children and teens meditation, mindfulness.
Yeah, we do. I go and I teach the teachers. So I have a course that I put teachers through on how to apply it in their own lives, but then how you can apply it in the classroom.
Mm-hmm.
And then I work with kids and anybody that needs it. And everybody kind of needs it. So I just do it as much as I can, and I just do it for free because I think it's such a valuable tool. And we actually offer the mindfulness practice here for free. There's no charge for it. You can come in.
So generous. So generous. Well, thank you for okay.
It's really not, though. It's really something that's just necessary, and so much in our society now. So I think we gotta make a little change here.
Yes, that's true. We do. Well, thank you so much for your time and your wisdom and sharing with us. And I'll just share with all of you, perhaps take some of what Sifu had shared with us today and take a moment for even just reflection. And mindfulness can be as simple as, just being, having some awareness of what's happening. I mean, that you can even start with just that, even if it's a beginning of just having awareness and looking around you. And there's so many different ways that you can practice mindfulness and connect with yourself and with nature, with your children or your partners or people that are important to you. So thank you for joining us, and we'll have another show or episode tomorrow. So look out for that as well. And join our Facebook group. We have a Facebook group for Courage to Rise, and we have so many things that are offered there as well, resources for you. So have a good rest of your day, and we'll see you tomorrow.